If you ever come across a discussion online about the many evil things that EA Games has done over the years, it's only a matter of time before some 40-year-old boomer says that they will never forgive EA for what they did to Bullfrog Productions. And if you're new to gaming, it may just sound like Bullfrog was just another unfortunate victim of EA, where corporate nonsense and a focus on increasing shareholder value above everything else squeezed a beloved developer dry before being discarded. But the story of Bullfrog's untimely demise doesn't quite follow that all too familiar mold. In fact, Bullfrog's unfortunate downfall really begins with the development of what would become one of, if not the most beloved game they ever created, Dungeon Keeper. Before development started for Dungeon Keeper, Bullfrog was a studio in Guildford, England that was renowned for their innovative game design thanks in part to one of its co-founders, the somewhat infamous Peter Molyneux. Now if you don't know anything about Molyneux, I feel like the best way to describe his notoriety is that he's somewhat like a proto-Todd Howard.
All of this just works.
He is undoubtedly very passionate about the games he creates, where he frequently says too much about features that are being worked on, even if they won't be implemented by the time of release. But that's just outside the times where he just flat out lies about game mechanics or features that were never going to be put in the first place.
The other thing I should say is, we can't really demonstrate it here, Fable can be played up to 4-player, multiplayer cooperatively. All you do is you take your joypad out, plug it in there, no setup screens, you're in the world.
Will you be able to show it today, or is it
we can't
just
really
too
show it
buggy
today,
to show it?
because we need another
And it will be in the
but
game.
it will be in there, and will absolutely be in the game.
I do think the hate he gets is pretty fair when it comes to his projects at 22 Cans, but it's worth remembering why this guy was such an iconic figure, who really did deserve the respect he earned in the 90s. This is a guy who basically stumbled into games development with no experience, and alongside some incredibly talented developers such as Glenn Corpus, essentially birthed the god game genre with the release of Populous in 1989. They managed to get EA Games to publish it when the publisher didn't have many new releases lined up, and it ended up selling millions of copies and winning a whole heap of awards for its unique and innovative gameplay. 1 million copies sold for any game is still an impressive number for today, even with online distribution and the video games market being so much larger than it used to be. So imagine how insane it would have been to see a game that hadn't really been done before, from an unknown studio, start hitting those numbers. With the success of Populous, Bullfrog went from a studio that was about to close its doors to a rapidly growing powerhouse. Molyneux went out of his way to find talented staff, and together they would create innovative games and push the limitations of what gamers thought was mechanically possible. Bullfrog followed up Populous with a game called Powermonger, and while it isn't the most well-known game from them, it was a success. But I'm mainly bringing it up here because Powermonger is an RTS game that came out a whole 2 years before Westwood released Dune 2. Yeah, they created a damn solid RTS game 2 years before the game that many people consider to be the birth of the RTS genre. And that really just shows how creative and forward-thinking Bullfrog was. Bullfrog steadily put out quality games in the early 90s, with Populous 2 and Syndicate being noteworthy games that are both worth checking out. EA was publishing most of their games at the time, and the two of them had a very good relationship. In fact, they had such a good thing going on between them that Bullfrog co-founder Les Edgar brought up that they should possibly merge with EA Games back in 1993, and began talks with them about how it would work. Around that time they were approached by other publishers that were interested in buying Bullfrog. On top of that, Les Edgar decided to talk to other major publishers so they could get the best deal for the studio. This process went on for 2 years, and in 1994 EA had bought a significant share of Bullfrog Productions, making a future merger pretty much inevitable. But also in late 1994 is when development officially started on Dungeon Keeper. The idea for the game had been bouncing around Peter's shiny head for a while at this point, and he wondered what it must be like to be a supervillain that creates absolutely amazing dungeons and lairs inside volcanoes or underwater. Also, how do they manage to hire staff when their goals are so obviously evil, and how much does it suck when a bunch of stupidly good guys come in and destroy absolutely everything without even thinking about how awesome your dungeon is? One night while playing board games with a bunch of other Bullfrog staff, Molyneux brought up these ideas, and how he had been thinking about a video game where you were a dungeon master that built their own dungeon in the pursuit of evil. He asked the group if they were interested in making such a game, and programmer Simon Carter and artist Mark Healy were definitely interested in the concept, and started trying to figure out how to make it possible. So the three of them got together, and with Molyneux leading the project, Simon Carter took the role of lead programmer, and Mark Healy was the lead artist as well as producer for Dungeon Keeper. With the goal of getting it done by the end of 1995, the first thing they set out to do was figure out what the hell Molyneux really envisioned in his head when he was talking about being a dungeon master. Fortunately for the team, Bullfrog had an incredibly talented team alongside them, so while they figured that out, they had people like Glenn Corpus smashing out the engine for Dungeon Keeper on his own, after a few months. Once the engine was in a good spot, Simon Carter and Mark Healy were able to add in gameplay mechanics, as well as the graphics for the game, while Glenn kept tweaking things behind scenes. By now it was already 1995, and in early January, EA had officially acquired Bullfrog Productions. This meant that early on in what would be Dungeon Keeper's long development cycle, a large shift in the workplace culture would happen at Bullfrog. Now you might think that being EA, this meant that everyone was locked into their offices for 16 hours a day, and forced to work on Dungeon Keeper non-stop 7 days a week until 3 AM in the morning, when they could finally rest for a couple of hours, but no. Peter Molyneux was perfectly capable of getting his stuff to do that without EA, and if something like that were to happen, it would be on his terms. In reality, the acquisition meant that Bullfrog suddenly went from having 30 to 60 staff members, all the way up to 150 in a matter of months. New staff were primarily hired so Bullfrog could work on multiple projects at once, not to speed up the development on games that were already being worked on, like Dungeon Keeper, so they didn't really speed up the development of the game. The influx of new staff also meant that Bullfrog was no longer a small studio where everyone knew each other on a more personal level, so everyone had to file more reports and go to more meetings, interrupting their workflow, somewhat ironically improve the company's workflow. But to be fair to EA, they did take a pretty hands-off approach to the creative process of Bullfrog, and gave them a great deal of autonomy on developing their games so as long as they actually finished them. Alongside all the new staff, as part of the merger deal, Peter Molyneux became the vice president of EA Games during the acquisition, which really just ended up pulling him away from making games, forcing him to go to countless meetings and do corporate nonsense that he really didn't enjoy doing. But this was devastating for Dungeon Keeper, as the team wouldn't be able to rely on him as much for direction, which is obviously a pretty big deal when he's the project leader. Well, the worst thing EA did was they put in a HR department at the Bullfrog offices. Yeah guys, sorry if any of you work in HR, but I personally don't see the point of having a whole ass department whose job it is to call me in every day just to repeat a joke I told some colleague the day before. HR aside, the game was slowly starting to take shape, and the team knew what they wanted to accomplish with Dungeon Keeper, but actually implementing the features to reach that goal was no easy task. They wanted the game's maps to be dynamic, where the player would carve out and create whatever dungeon they want, and have the game's AI easily figure out how to navigate it. The behaviour of the game's many monsters had to be unique, readable, and somewhat lifelike, so they didn't just look like mindless robots wandering the halls. Simon also wanted a dynamic lighting system, which he was told wasn't possible at the time, so he took that statement as a challenge and decided to try and make it anyway. Back in 1995, every one of these tasks was easier said than done. AI navigation in games is still pretty primitive, and implementing what they had in mind alongside the other AI features would make even high-end PCs chug at the time. Add something like dynamic lighting onto that, and good luck finding anyone that might actually be able to play the game. But fortunately, Bullfrog did have a strong research and development team with guys like Ian Shaw and Glenn Corpus, who were working on improving AI systems in games. And Simon was confident that the team could get all the features they wanted in Dungeon Keeper, they just needed time to get it all working. Because of all that, it was pretty obvious that Dungeon Keeper wasn't going to be ready for its fourth quarter 1995 release. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but a few other studios under EA's umbrella had also delayed their games, and the publisher now didn't have enough games coming out in the third quarter of 1995. In a board meeting, EA began to pressure Peter and Les Edgar into releasing Dungeon Keeper early, way before it was ready for release, just to satisfy their insatiable shareholders. Peter wasn't going to let that happen. Even though he wasn't as involved in Dungeon Keeper's development at this point, due to his other responsibilities at EA, he knew he couldn't let EA sacrifice it just to fill a release gap that wasn't Bullfrog's fault. Les Edgar agreed with Peter, and they told EA that they wouldn't prematurely throw Dungeon Keeper out to the public, but they would develop a whole new game from start to finish in about 6 to 8 weeks just to meet the third quarter release window if it would save Dungeon Keeper. That game ended up being high octane, and while it's an impressive game for its short development time, it sure feels like a game that was made in 8 weeks. But despite high octane's flaws, it saved Dungeon Keeper, and the team was able to focus and hopefully finish it sometime in 1996. Also, it seems like everyone at Bullfrog really has fond memories of the frantic weeks to try and get this game out on time. As 1995 went by, a lot of the desired features that the team wanted were steadily being implemented. Simon had managed to actually get his dynamic lighting working, alongside adding shadows to the creatures in-game. And this is without blowing up mid-range PCs at the time. And honestly, it was pretty insane seeing lighting like this back then. Creature AI was coming along nicely, but it still wasn't quite there, with it taking too long to update when there were changes to the map. They also added in a possession spell, allowing you to switch from the bird's eye perspective to a first person one, giving you full control of any of your creatures. Again, this was pretty mind blowing at the time. They even managed to get a gameplay trailer out to showcase what they were working on to the public, which just managed to get gamers hyped up for Dungeon Keeper. I know, hard to imagine Peter Molyneux hyping up a game. Unfortunately, even with all these features being put in place, by the end of 1995, what they had was apparently not very good. They had managed to get all these crazy technical features working in game, but it wasn't fitting together nicely, and they lacked direction. Direction was on the way though. Peter Molyneux was just itching to get back to actually making games. He felt like a bit of a fish out of water with his vice president responsibilities, and realised that his passion was really in programming and actually working on the games with his team at Bullfrog. So as the year turned to 1996, he decided he was going to put his full-time effort into Dungeon Keeper, and really turn it into the best game it can possibly be. He knew that the bones of the game were there, and they were solid, but the overall gameplay didn't have the right focus. The game at this stage apparently played a lot like Command & Conquer, where you just kind of built up a base and summoned an army to fight for you using gold and mana. So he shifted the gameplay focus back to the idea of managing the dungeon, instead of outright controlling it, making the player have to deal with the chaos of their own creation alongside the external threats coming to destroy it. But one of the problems with him focusing on Dungeon Keeper is that it really highlighted how much he missed making games with his team, and he was now even more dissatisfied with his role at EA. This led to one fateful night where Peter had his close friend Tim Rance come around to his place for a couple of cheeky pints. These couple of cheeky pints turned into both of them getting absolutely wasted, and after I assume the two of them ate a box of nuts and bolts, as well as a couple of Smack Barn P wets, they did what we all love to do, complain about EA games. Peter told Tim that he was thinking about quitting his job at EA, and Tim, being the good friend he is, gassed him up and encouraged him to do it. So much so that they actually went to Peter's computer and wrote out a resignation email. Now Peter claims that he probably wasn't going to send it, but that didn't matter, because Tim Rance just hit send for him anyway, and now Peter was going to have to deal with the consequences of his drunken actions. And EA Games responded quickly, telling Peter that he was no longer allowed to come to any of the offices and couldn't work on any games. EA was scared that he was going to disrupt things at Bullfrog, understandably fearing that he would convince staff there to follow him to whatever future he was setting up for himself. To make things even worse, they told him that they were going to cancel Dungeon Keeper, as they didn't really see the project going anywhere. This was devastating for Peter. He absolutely loved going to the Bullfrog offices to work with everyone there, and he knew, just as everyone else at Bullfrog did, that Dungeon Keeper was really shaping up to be something special, and they had to get this game out. They had saved Dungeon Keeper once before, and Peter was going to have to save it again somehow. He managed to come to an agreement with EA Games. He would leave Bullfrog and EA after Dungeon Keeper was finished. Until that day, he would still be banned from going to the offices, but he could have a small core development team set up at his apparently very large house and finish the project there. So a core team of 7 moved into Peter's house, including himself, Simon and Dean Carter, Mark Healy, Jonty Barnes, and Tony Cox. The 7 of them would work there until the game was finished, with Simon Carter also living at the house during the development. It was here where Dungeon Keeper finally took its shape into its final release, with the 7 of them often working until 3 AM in the morning, 7 days a week. While a lot of the hard technical issues such as unit navigation, lighting, and even most of the creatures' graphics had been done, they pretty much ripped apart the game that they had created at that point and started to work from the ground up. The player would now summon imps, who you could delegate tasks such as mining or claiming land, which were things that the player had to do previously themselves. Mechanics like using gold and mana to purchase creatures was taken out, and now players had to capture a portal somewhere on the map. The portal will summon creatures into your service automatically depending on how you had built up your dungeon. With more random creatures inhabiting your dungeon, more effort was put into how they interacted with each other. Some creatures like flies and spiders are natural born enemies, so if you force them to share the same lair with each other, they will get angry and start fighting each other. Everything was starting to come together now, with the 7 basically becoming a family while they worked together. While the hours may have been pretty brutal, and you would think they would burn out pretty quick doing them, they actually were just having a ton of fun making the game, and knew that they had to put these kind of hours into it. They would often play a whole lot of pranks on each other while working, and allegedly, they were also getting pretty damn high together as well. Artist Mark Healy was pretty much just punching cones constantly due to a back injury he had. He wasn't the only one getting on the wacky tobacco though. Apparently one day Peter made a whole heap of chili, which he just absolutely filled with a special ingredient, when a bunch of EA executives were over and they all got pretty fucked up from it. But seriously though, how many of us have just wanted to see a whole heap of EA executives just fucked out of their minds, greening out? But even with the pranks and the substance abuse, they were still crunching hard to try to get the game finished. Over the months, the team would constantly be adding and cutting features, refining them, and testing them constantly in the multiplayer matches between each other. If the team had thought that someone had won too easily, or the game went in a certain direction that they didn't like, they would change things around. They were even pretty optimistic that they'll be able to get this game finished and on store shelves before Christmas 1996. Unfortunately, even with the heavy crunch going on at Peter's house, they had to delay the game again. It just wasn't up to the standards that the team wanted by the end of the year, and what was originally going to be 4 to 5 months of crunch was pushed out to 11. Even with the increasingly impatient EA wanting to get it out soon, they had to push it back. But in mid-1997, the game was finally finished, and it was finally released in Europe and North America on June 26, 1997, where gamers would finally find out just how good it was to be evil. So this is Dungeon Keeper. The game opens up with a cinematic showing a knight entering a dungeon filled with treasure, slaying trolls and just straight up making a mess of the place before finally being decapitated by the game's icon, the Horned Reaper. From there you pretty much have the campaign to play or the multiplayer skirmishes, which brings me on how to play Dungeon Keeper in the current day. If you don't have an original copy of the game, you can get Dungeon Keeper off Good Old Games or Steam. But instead of updating the Windows version of Dungeon Keeper to run on modern systems, these ones instead run the DOS version through DOSBox. There isn't a huge problem with this, the game works fine. The in-game resolution is pretty damn low, and unless you're using an old school CRT monitor to play the game, which, if you are, fucking sick, but otherwise, the game just looks like a compressed as fuck JPEG. And as soon as you zoom out a little bit, just look at it. Fortunately, there is a fix for this, and that is Keeper Effects. Basically, it's a free mod that is compatible with all official versions of Dungeon Keeper that fans have made to make the game much nicer to play on new systems. Most importantly, Keeper Effects allows you to play higher resolutions and uncaps the frame rate from its limit of 20 without breaking the game. On top of that, it fixes a few bugs that were never patched, adds some quality of life improvements such as the controls, and improves the AI a little bit. Fortunately, it doesn't really change anything too drastically, so the experience that you have playing Keeper Effects really doesn't feel much different from the original game on release. I have to say that playing Keeper Effects really did just feel like I was playing the original game as I remembered it in the 90s, which is really what you want when you come to these revamps. Jumping into the campaign, you're treated to a nice pretty overworld that is just sickeningly good. The narrator, who later becomes known as the Mentor, gives you a brief overview of the lands that you need to corrupt and tells you about his utter disdain for these places. I always loved how he talks about the levels before you get into them. As a kid, this was some of the funniest shit I had heard from a video game at that time, and unlike most things I found funny back then, it still got a little chuckle out of me every now and then.
Eversmile. Set in the realm of joy, the people of Eversmile are plagued only by aching facial muscles, and not anthrax as we had hoped. Eversmile is a disgusting land of good humour and polite frivolity.
The first 5 levels of Dungeon Keeper act as the game's tutorial. You are a keeper, and at the centre of your dungeon is your dungeon heart, vulnerable, and beating loudly for everyone to hear. You have imps that are loyal, but they are workers and won't be able to defend themselves very well, let alone your heart from anything hostile. Fortunately, there is a portal that we can capture with our imps, if we order them to dig to it. And with that we can attract creatures to our dungeon who are looking for a new home under a master that will fulfill their needs. We can also get our imps to mine gold seams that are scattered across the map, bringing the precious metal back to our treasure room for safekeeping. Mining gold does take long to get through though, and large deposits of them will take your imps some time to mine out as they constantly run back and forth to your treasure room from the deposits. In the first level we can only attract flies and beetles into our dungeon, creatures that would be pretty much useless after a few levels, but they are easy to keep happy. As long as they have a lair to sleep in, food to eat, and get paid a small amount of gold, they will do whatever we tell them. And if they don't do that fast enough, we can always slap the shit out of them to make them go faster. Slapping their shit up does make them a bit angry if you do it too much, but fortunately, our imps can't get angry. They will just die if we beat them too hard. That being said, we will be slapping these little guys a lot throughout the game just to get them to work harder. Also, if you're just waiting for time to pass, you can always possess any creature of yours and go into a first person perspective. You can use all of your creature's abilities while like this, and they even get a little bit of a buff while you control them, making them stronger. The possession spell was pretty mind-blowing at the time. Keep in mind that the RTS genre had only really exploded in mainstream popularity by the end of 1995, so not even 2 years before Dungeon Keeper came out. And the idea of having an RTS FPS hybrid where you could do something like this was something a lot of people were talking about, whether they were game developers or just regular gamers. And I do think that Dungeon Keeper was probably the first time that a lot of people saw and experienced something like this. Unfortunately, as cool as the possession spell was, and still kind of is, you won't be using it that much. Using it for combat means you can't support the rest of your creatures from above, so unless you know you're going to steamroll your opponent, you really don't want to use it that much. But possessing imps isn't a bad idea if you don't need to pay much attention to your dungeon at the time. Taking control of one allows you to mine more efficiently and capture territory quickly, so it does have some functionality there, especially at the start of the level when you don't have much to do. Shortly after settling into our small dungeon, a group of heroes has decided to show up and try to stop us from expanding our evil reach. If their tunneler manages to reach a wall that our imps haven't fortified yet, they will break in and ruin the feng shui of our rooms before destroying our dungeon heart. But they are easily dealt with. We literally pick up and throw our creatures all right on top of them and watch them massacre these stupidly good people that probably donate to charity on a regular basis and don't skip YouTube ads. Kill them all, they make me sick. Killing them though grabs the attention of the Lord of the Land.
Beware, the Lord of the Land approaches.
In the name of all that is good, we shall defeat you!
A knight in shining armor that wants to purge us from his lands and take our precious gold for himself. These guys are tough if you're not prepared, but killing or capturing him means we can corrupt the region unopposed, letting us move to the next area.
You have conquered this realm.
After each level, we get to hear the mentor talk about how our evil has taken over this land.
Branna Hawk. War and anthrax have taken to this land like fleas to a rat. The region is, thanks to your unstinting efforts, now a major eyesore.
I really like that Dungeon Keeper just tells us that we're pure fucking evil. None of this misunderstood by the heroes business, or the good guys are really the evil ones, that requires big brain media literacy to really understand. We're just straight up pure evil, and we want to destroy the peaceful lives of the innocents on the surface world.
Withers Dread. This place now has a proper name because of what you did here. There is a healthy disrespect for life, and you'll be amused to hear that cannibalism has gained a strong foothold amongst the ragged inhabitants.
As the levels progress, the game gives you access to new rooms to build and creatures to attract. The second level introduces the training room, letting us train our creatures to higher levels, making them stronger and giving them new abilities. It also lets us have a new creature, the Demon Spawn. These creatures, while not particularly strong in the grand scheme of things, are ambitious of how strong they can potentially get, and will join your dungeon if you give them a large enough training room where they'll happily spend pretty much all their free time. Later in the game, if they manage to reach a max level of 10, they can transform into a dragon, which are a very strong creature to have at your disposal. Training does cost gold though. The lower tier creatures like the Demon Spawn don't cost much to train at all, but once you start getting a lot of creatures all in a large training room, your gold reserves will quickly start draining to zero. Running out of gold obviously means you won't be able to train or build anything, but it also puts another massive risk on the horizon.
It is payday.
Oh, you didn't think these creatures would live under you and defend you with their lives for free, did you? They may be hideous evil creatures, but they aren't as low as Reddit mods or 4chan Jannies, alright? You can always check how much money you need to keep aside for payday, but making sure you actually have that gold there for it can be a mission in itself. Each creature has a base cost, and that increases depending on their level. So even if you do have the funds to train all your creatures up to high levels, being able to get the gold to pay them all over a long period of time can be impossible. Fortunately, creatures don't just leave straight away if you can't pay them. First, it just really pisses them off.
Your gold reserves are running low. Your minions are annoyed. You cannot pay them.
And if they're upset about something else in your dungeon, you can pretty much guarantee they will start lashing out towards you. What they do when they're angry also depends on the creature, really showcasing the different creature personalities in the game. For example, creatures that love gold such as dragons will steal from you if they get angry, but trolls and orcs will just destroy your rooms instead. If you anger a vampire enough, it will talk shit behind your back and make other creatures angry at you too. Piss it off even more and it will start just killing them. If you can't please a creature after they start getting angry, they will eventually leave though, Most will just disappear, but some will actually join the enemy if there is one. Gold is a finite resource, but for most levels it's not the biggest problem, with the game giving you more than enough in most levels to get through them, unless you like to turtle. Which I do. A lot. But this is a management game, so you're going to have to learn how to manage your finances here, unlike in real life. The third level introduces the library to your dungeon, pretty much equal in importance to the training room. Putting your creatures in here gets them to do some much needed research, unlocking not only spells for you to use from above, but also new rooms for you to build that will attract stronger creatures alongside other benefits they bring. Much like how the training room attracts demon spawns, the library lures in warlocks to your dungeon, who love to spend all their spare time researching for you. Unlike training though, it costs nothing to have the creatures in here, so it's something your creatures can do when you go broke for short periods of time. While this early in the game though, there isn't much for you to unlock with the library. You do need to re-unlock everything at the start of each level, so there will be times where you really need to juggle up training creatures early to defend or attack, or rushing those research unlocks to get an edge on your enemies. Especially with warlocks, which are pretty useless in combat until you get a few levels into them, while also being the best researchers in the game. The fourth tutorial level shows off the benefits of research, with you being unable to reach the heroes you need to fight without learning how to build bridges first. While researching bridges though, you will also learn how to build the workshop, which attracts trolls that love to craft traps and doors for your dungeon rooms.
A trap has been manufactured.
But it's the fifth and last tutorial level where everything comes together and you're put up against an opposing dungeon keeper. Turns out there's a lot of evil down here, vying for dominance, and you have to crush all opposition, no matter their alignment. It's also here you first see what is probably my favourite creature in the game, the Bile Demon. I always found it funny that pretty much all the creatures in Dungeon Keeper are hideous monsters or evil mythological beings, and then Bullfrog just decides to put in a creature that's just some ordinary bloke from Lancashire who just got lost trying to find Greg's and ended up down here. But fortunately for him, we don't judge his pungent aroma, and have use for his fighting abilities that he clearly picked up from beating his missus after North FC lost their last footy match. Remember, we are undeniably evil in this game. In all seriousness though, the Bile Demon is a solid creature to have. They can take a beating, and their gas attacks are pretty brutal if their enemies don't have any resistance to it. Also, if the Horned Reaper wasn't already the icon for Dungeon Keeper, I'm certain that it would have been this absolute beast of a lad instead. But you also gain the prison in this level. If your prisoners starve to death, they will probably rise as skeletons. These skinny fellas are pretty good fighters in the early and mid game, training up really fast and not costing a lot to hold on to. But if they have to share the same lair with the other new solid unit, the Bile Demon, they will just fight to the death.
Your creatures are fighting amongst themselves.
So if you want to hold on to creatures that hate each other, you're going to have to design your dungeons to have multiple rooms of the same type, just to avoid infighting. I also think this level is where I really started noticing how good the creature AI was when the game first came out, and truth be told, it still mostly holds up. It's easy to forget how bad a lot of pathfinding was in RTS games, not to mention how units reacted to certain things happening. Go play Warcraft 2 or Red Alert, which were two of the best in the genre at the time, and see how long it takes before you get annoyed at your units getting stuck on a wall or not retaliating to an enemy attacking them. Then you will know what I mean. But with Dungeon Keeper you don't have direct control over the creatures, so it's entirely up to the game's AI to solve these problems, and accomplishing a task like that back in the day was a pretty tall task. One of the most popular ways studios implemented AI pathfinding was to get it to hug walls and map out an area so they could navigate around it, or put preset waypoints for them to go to. The latter wasn't going to work because you were carving out the map, making more of it accessible at a time, and wall hugging to get around wouldn't work either because the walls were essentially always changing. The creature navigation in AI was mainly done by Ian Shaw, and he managed to develop a robust system that worked really well. Initially it was quite slow to update, taking a full 2 seconds for their AI to adjust to map changes, but they were able to refine it to a point where players didn't really notice the adjustment time. And by refine, I mean they apparently brute forced it to work somehow. It may not be that impressive by today's standards, but it still holds up well enough. The game has so much character to it that even when a whole bunch of stuff happens that freezes your creatures for a few seconds while they figure out what their next task is, it really does just look like they're just confused and need a second to think. And keep in mind that this AI script is running on every creature individually, with the in-game creature limit going all the way up to 255. It's unlikely that you'll ever hit that limit unless you're intentionally trying to get to it. But again, it's insane that they were able to get this working this well on 1997 hardware. After I admire the AI and finish this level by defeating the enemy keeper, we're out of the tutorial.
Your minions are winning a battle. You have defeated an enemy keeper. You have conquered this realm.
The first non-tutorial level, Snuggle Delve, introduces my favourite room to the game, the Torture Chamber, and with it, Mistresses, the only unit that gains happiness when you slap it. And also loves to be tortured when it has free time. The Torture Chamber has two uses, torturing your creatures, increasing the speed of all other creatures of that type at the cost of angering them a bit, but its main use is the second one. Drop enemy prisoners in there, and after some time, as long as they don't die, they will switch to your side.
An enemy has been converted to your cause.
But the reason I always liked it was because most of the creatures in the game get their own unique torture animation. Warlocks get a beating by their own staffs, wizards are constantly turned into frogs and back again, and fairies have their wings impaled before being spun around like spinning plates. But my favourite is always the poor thieves, who just get their balls absolutely busted until they give in. According to the official Dungeon Keeper guidebook, this is also Mark Healy's favourite torture. Actually, later in this book it also states that he immediately subscribed to an S&M magazine right after joining the Dungeon Keeper team for inspiration. This whole room is a pleasure chamber for you, isn't it, Mark, you dirty dog? While on the subject of the official guidebook though, I never came across a secret torture scene that is Shintaro Kanoe's favourite. And goddamn, I tried to find it, believe me. Back to the game though. One thing about the campaign that I always liked is that the level doesn't just end when you win. You can keep playing on the map after you conquer the realm, only progressing when you hit spacebar, letting you admire your dungeon and keep training the creatures up if you want. But you can also explore parts of the map that might look like they could have contained something that may have helped you out. Hell, you might get an announcement like this while doing that.
Your creatures have discovered a mysterious magic box.
These magic boxes are your reward for exploring the dark depths. Most of the levels in this game will contain one of these insanely strong transfer creature boxes if you keep your eyes out. Using one of these lets you bring one of your creatures from this level to the dungeon in the next. So after you win, you can just train a strong creature up to level 10 and then transfer it right over to make things a little bit easier for you. The framework of the campaign plays out like most RTS games, where you're introduced to a new room, unit, or spell and are given a scenario that really highlights their strong points, giving you the knowledge of what works and what doesn't work in certain situations. This is until level 10, Nevergrim, where you unlock the last room, the Scavenger Room, which you can use to steal enemy creatures. And by now you've also unlocked almost every spell and have seen almost every creature the game has to offer, so it's now that the game really starts to challenge you. Nevergrim is one of the most memorable levels in the game because it's one-on-one with another keeper and you both have an open floor plan with hardly anything to dig. So the enemy AI will quickly start moving to attack you, with a small island between both of your dungeons becoming a brutal arena where imps are in a constant tug of war to capture it. Nevergrim is followed by Hearth, where now you have to defend your dungeon from heroes attacking from all sides at set intervals like it's a survival mode. So if you like to turtle like I do, you're going to have to figure out a new strategy. It's really this half of the game that has the most memorable levels, which keep challenging you, even if you are transferring a strong level 10 creature over to each level like I was. Hey, it's been decades since I last played this game and I never finished it back then, so give me a break. The game will start getting you to go up against multiple keepers at the same time as well, and honestly, you're probably going to have a few losses before figuring out the do's and don'ts of each level, so replaying levels is really to be expected. Sometimes you might just fuck up and need to start again, or sometimes the enemy AI might do something unexpected and make it insanely difficult for you to beat them. But starting a level from scratch isn't too bad. Personally, I often like the setup phases in a lot of old RTS games, and Dungeon Keeper is no exception to that. The way your dungeon expands out and you plan where you're going to place your building so both you and your creatures can navigate it efficiently is an aspect of the game that I actually really enjoy for some reason. It definitely helps with the game's sound design that really shines as more creatures join your dungeon and work in all the new rooms that you construct for them. The sound of imps mining gold, trolls manufacturing in the workshop, creatures training, and even all the different footsteps sounds really create an atmosphere of a living, breathing dungeon that has really become a home for these creatures. Add the atmospheric soundtrack underneath it all, and the game honestly takes on a pretty comfy feel when not a lot is actually going on. Unfortunately, this comfy feel will break when combat does kick off. The war cries and absolute chaos going around does sometimes make you want to turn the sound right down, to be honest. This is more of a problem with some of the later levels when you have an absolute horde of creatures fighting throngs of enemies. Mistresses and priestesses are the worst offenders here, with their high-pitched screams piercing through every other sound, assaulting your ears while they attack. But this isn't the only problem with a lot of units fighting at once. Combat naturally gets more difficult when there's more units involved. That's part of an RTS, right? But in Dungeon Keeper, there comes a point where it's just hard to tell what the actual fuck is going on when there's a whole lot of creatures firing off heaps of different abilities. It really becomes hard to tell sometimes who's winning, or what you should do to support your creatures, and you're just kind of sitting there spamming heal or lightning on these little icons until you run out of gold. It unfortunately boils the combat down to just throwing every one of your creatures into combat and pretty much hoping that the numbers are in your favor, and it's damn hard to tell if they are sometimes. There is the argument that maybe I shouldn't be spending so much time building up a massive army and training my creatures for so long before taking on the enemy, but when half the game is focused on managing a dungeon, I feel like it's a little bit unfair to say spend less time on managing your dungeon. It's what I enjoy doing here, alright? Either way, the only times where I had real issues with the combat being a pure numbers game was in the last quarter of the game. Level 14 onwards is where the odds feel really stacked against you in every level, and you need to be smart about how you approach each one of them. But in level 14, Sleepy Burrow, this is where you're most likely to encounter the game's icon, the Horned Reaper, for the first time. Horny is the strongest creature that you can get in the game, and according to Mark Healy, his design was based on his ex-girlfriend who apparently had a similar grin, as well as temperament. You're not beating the pleasure chamber allegations here, Mark. Having the Horned Reaper is like playing with fire, and the game lets you know this straight away. He is a force to be reckoned with, but keeping him happy is a task in itself, because nothing makes him happy. He gets angry if he sleeps in his lair, so you need to make sure he doesn't do that, but he also gets angry for every second that you hold him in your hand, so you can't just cradle him like a baby while you find him something to do. He is basically a ticking time bomb, and once he hits a certain anger point he goes berserk, killing everything he sees and destroying rooms in your dungeon. So playing the long game with a Horned Reaper is a risky task, but you also can't just attract him to your dungeon like other creatures, so you're unlikely to have one waltz into your dungeon and make things difficult for you. You only get a Horned Reaper if the level has one for you to capture, or if you sacrifice a Mistress, Troll, and Bile Demon in the temple, but you probably won't know about that unless you looked it up somewhere. Training him, while costly, is the easiest way to keep him from getting upset, but sticking him on a guard post or getting him to pray in the temple will stop him from going berserk quickly as well. Just don't accidentally sacrifice him if you put him in the temple, because no one likes you if you do that.
The gods have punished your unworthy offering. Your creatures are becoming angry.
A couple of levels later, you're in Tulip Scent, and this stage gives you two of them straight away in their own locked off rooms. Having a separate mini dungeon was a pretty popular method that people used to try to keep Reapers happy, probably because of this map, but it never really works well for me. They just kind of stay in their lair, which just gets them angry, and I don't notice. That's even when you're trying to get them to train constantly, and you will want them training constantly in this level, because you have an aggressive keep to the south who is working his way to attack you, while having heroes digging around your base looking for an unsecured entrance. Once the fighting started here, it felt non-stop. I legit didn't even realize I was destroying the enemy keepers hard until it was announced that I had won.
You have conquered this realm. Your creatures are under...
But the last three levels are certainly memorable. Level 18, Blaze End, has a massive hero fortress to the north that you need to destroy. Not a problem when you see how much gold is on the map. What you don't realize is that mining a certain amount of golds in this map summons waves of heroes that will dig towards you. The first wave may not be that tough, but they quickly start sending strong units to fight you. It is very easy not to be prepared for them either, so you need to be smart about training your units just enough without spending too much gold before digging for more to summon more heroes. Once you have a strong army though, the map isn't a cakewalk. The fortress at the north side of the map is filled with traps, and has an absolutely obscene amount of heroes waiting for you inside. My army was massive, and I almost lost to these guys when I finally broke through to them. I had already lost this map twice early on from the waves of heroes, so I was not looking forward to slogging through it again, but I managed to beat them in the end. After Blaze End is the penultimate level, Missile, and I have never gotten past this one before. Mainly because I lost this level a bunch of times and then got distracted by other games that came out around the same time, and then never played Dungeon Keeper up to this point again. Missile has an interesting premise. You capture the impressive remains of a previously defeated Keeper's dungeon, with the enemy Keeper that defeated him residing far in the northeast. But you'll quickly realize why this Keeper lost. He has no training room, and you're incapable of building one, so you only have access to level 1 creatures that you attract through the portal, and there is no transfer creature box in the previous level either, so you're not bringing in a level 10 one to make things easy for you. The enemy Keeper is not aggressive at all though. He will just sit in his corner and wait for you to attack him, comfortably training his creatures so they can easily outmatch yours, so you need to find a way to get stronger creatures before taking him on. Directly to the east of your dungeon, however, there are some tunnels that a bunch of tentacles and heroes reside in. They are higher level, but not too high for your level 1 creatures to fight, so you can slowly progress through, fighting them when you're ready and taking them prisoner. Now, prisoners turn into skeletons of equal level if they die in captivity, but this is the last thing you want to do in Missile. Even if the skeletons are stronger than some of the units you capture, your opponent has a ton of high level skeletons and he has them all working in a scavenger room which will convert your skeletons to his side pretty damn fast. So you need to throw the heroes in the torture chamber and make sure they don't die until they convert to your side. You also don't have access to the heal ability either in this map, so the only way to stop them from dying during torture is to force feed them chickens from your hatchery, requiring constant attention. Once you convert a group of tentacles or hero units to your side though, you can comfortably progress further into those tunnels next to your dungeon, capturing more heroes that are stronger than the last before you have a decent fighting force and a gem seam that will make gold not an issue for the rest of the level. With your growing converted army, you can venture north where the Lord of the Land resides in a garrison with a pretty strong force, all worth capturing and converting to your side. But the real prize here is right at the top of it. 2 small training rooms for you to capture. And once you have them, you can finally build a training room for yourself and start turning all those level 1 creatures you've been holding onto into an unstoppable fighting force for you to destroy the enemy keeper with. I hated this level as a kid, but now it's become one of my favorites. Playing out like a dungeon crawl level where you have to constantly pay attention to your prisoners or else you might put yourself in an unwinnable state. Creatures in the torture chamber don't have a set time until they convert, it just seems to happen at random, so you can't just ignore heroes in the torture chamber just because you think they might convert soon, because they might just end up dying. You do have some wiggle room with losses though, so losing a couple units isn't the end of the world here. Also, don't let your archers die from wizards casting rebound, that's not ideal. But as good as Missile is, it's ultimately overshadowed by the final level in the game, Skybird Trill.
Skybird Trill, the ultimate in cute. A frown in Skybird Trill brings all the townspeople to the sufferer's door with gifts of love, fine cheer, and eternal friendship. A place where nothing can ever go wrong, or so they fondly believe.
As soon as the level starts, you're told that a powerful hero known as the Avatar has his castle here, and there is an opposing keeper who wants the Avatar's soul for himself. After a whole bunch of levels that have the odds stacked against you with restrictions or incoming threats, Skybird Trill almost feels like a sandbox level, where you can do whatever you want. There are 4 gem scenes that you can easily get to, making gold hardly an issue throughout the level. You also have access to almost every creature in the game, and have a pretty large section of the map to yourself, allowing you to create a robust dungeon. But be careful digging north. The Avatar's castle is surrounded by a moat that has a bunch of level 10 tentacles hanging around it, and if you aren't ready for them, they can easily destroy your dungeon heart. There is no transfer box in Missile as well, so you're not going to have a strong level 10 unit to counter them with. I accidentally breached the moat, but the AI for the tentacles was kind of messing up and it ignored my dungeon heart. It killed most of my creatures and a lot of my imps, making things really difficult, but I managed to whittle them down. Unfortunately, I didn't have a prison or a torture chamber yet, so I couldn't convert them. Oh well, I'm sure this won't bite me in the ass later. I decided to build my numbers back up and train the fuck out of my creatures if I'm going to attack the Avatar's castle. I imagine the Avatar is going to be incredibly strong, and I just know that the castle is going to be filled with traps. Also, one of the few things we don't have access to in this level is the bridge, leaving only one small narrow land bridge as a way to get to the castle, so I feel like it's going to be a very tough fight. As I'm training my creatures up, I suddenly get this message saying that I've destroyed the Avatar's castle, but the Blue Keeper has taken him prisoner and I need to go kill him. But I haven't even dug out the land bridge to the castle yet. Oh shit, the Keeper has low level scouts attacking me, this can't be good. I guess I turtled too long and I'd better get my ass over there and take him out then. Oh fuck, he has a level 10 Reaper and my dungeon is decimating all my imps with lightning strikes. I knew I really fucked up when I accidentally dug out this section into the moat. Because of this, I'm pushed into a very difficult defense against the Blue Keeper. He has so much gold that he just lightning strikes my imps with little consequence, making it really hard to keep mining the gold I need to keep my creatures happy. This small land bridge just above my dungeon becomes an absolute meat grinder. I have a strong army, but he has high level vampires which are incredibly difficult to kill, rivaling the Horned Reaper in combat ability. But amongst all the chaos and what feels like a brutal last stand, I managed to convert his level 10 Horned Reaper to my ranks. He alone won't be able to turn the tides, but with him and my horde of dragons, I'm able to hold the line and capture more fallen troops, letting me convert everything that was once his to my side. He's doing the same to me, but I'm managing to get stronger units off of him than he is from me. However, unfortunately for me, the constant battle is crippling my economy, My creatures are just getting pissed off at me, struggling to pay them. Well, I quickly make sure my torture victims aren't about to die. He turns my Horned Reaper into a chicken without me realizing. And as soon as I notice this, I go to save him, but this goddamn fucking troll eats him right in front of me. There goes my strongest unit, and I still haven't managed to take out these high-level vampires that just wreak fucking havoc on my army. I'm starting to think I've lost this one. But I've been in this level for over an hour now, and I don't really understand what a sunken cost fallacy is, so I'm fighting until the end. I have no idea how much the Blue Keeper has left in him, but those vampires seem to be all that he's throwing at me. If I do manage to kill them, they resurrect back at his base one level lower until about level 3. But one of his level 9 ones overextends and gets cornered fighting in my prison. I manage to knock him out instead of killing him, and I quickly start torturing him, constantly hammering a stake into his heart until he converts to my side. I managed to capture another strong vampire, and it's now that I notice that the units he's throwing at me are all low level. As long as I keep the pressure on him, he won't be able to rebuild an army that can take on mine. I also have so many vampires now that as long as I can train them, there is nothing that can stop me. It's now that I finally start moving in and capturing the Avatar's castle. The Blue Keeper doesn't make it easy, but I slowly make my way through capturing the tiles that's getting harder for him to defend. I have no gold, and my creatures are getting angrier, but we're getting there. After capturing it all I need to do is build a bridge and get over there to Blue's side so I can start capturing his dungeon. It's now that I remember that I can't build bridges, but it really looks like I should be able to by now. I can get to the Avatar's prison and attack him, but I want vengeance on Blue first. So I look up how to get bridges on this level, because I've explored everything and it turns out you don't get to build them, and I have to take out the Avatar now. Not only that, but this entire confrontation with Blue was never meant to happen. Blue was just meant to stay on his side of the river for the whole game and not capture the castle. He still takes the Avatar prisoner once you capture the castle, but he isn't meant to be this aggressive. It turns out, because I killed those tentacles at the start of the level and left their bodies laying there, some of his imps tried to make their way to them and ended up capturing tiles that they had never meant to take. This leads to Blue capturing the castle and taking a whole bunch of stuff that was meant for me. This insane battle that went on for close to an hour was all because the AI bugged out. Oh well, my creatures are all juiced up, so I guess I'll just drop them there and take out the Avatar. My units knock the Avatar towards Blue's locked doors, which puts the Avatar outside of my dragon's aggro range. Because the Avatar is now standing next to an enemy door, he starts to beat it down. Again, this probably isn't meant to happen, but those doors lead directly to Blue's dungeon heart, and thanks to me taking out all of his units, he can't beat the absolute beast that is the Avatar. The Avatar is actually the strongest unit in the game, stronger than the Horned Reaper. His name is also a direct reference to the player's character in the Ultimate series, with his model being a replica of the player's sprite in Ultimate 8, Pagan. He just slaughters everything while destroying Blue's dungeon heart. It makes me happy seeing him summon imps to try to defend himself, that motherfucker. With Blue out of the picture, I can finally build bridges. This is because of Keeper effects though, you're never actually meant to build bridges in this level. But they aren't much help anymore, because the Avatar is now making his way through his old castle down to my dungeon. And despite my massive army, I have no idea how strong he actually is, and I'm still a little bit hesitant to face him. Fortunately, I remember I have 3 increased level boxes and a resurrect creature box. I have so many level 10 creatures now that the Avatar doesn't stand a chance.
Your creatures are becoming angry.
But even after I defeat him, I get this ominous message. And shortly after, a whole lot of level 10 heroes just start dropping from all over the place. The Avatar has been resurrected and he has rallied the last of his troops to kill me once and for all. Unfortunately for them, I have so many high level vampires that nothing can stop me from ruling this world. And he goes down easy.
Creatures are becoming angry. You are victorious. Your darkness pervades throughout the kingdom. All hail the new Lord of Shadows.
Now let's see that ending as the Lord of Shadows.
long terror. The world of Skybird Trill is nothing more than a charred wreck of a nightmare. We have won a furious, vital victory, and you are ruler supreme over the whole world. What next, Master?
Hell yeah. Now we can finally look at all the lands we've corrupted, and replay any of the previous levels if we want to. It's a nice little reward for finishing the game that I wish a lot of other RTS games had in them, to be honest. The campaign as a whole is great. It does a great job of slowly increasing the difficulty so each level is a challenge without being frustrating. It really makes you revel in being pure evil. And as a guy who always picks the goody two-shoes options in games, that's not an easy feat for me. And it seems like pretty much everyone who picked up the game on release felt the same way, because the game was pretty much universally praised by critics and gamers. This is without me even mentioning the multiplayer side of the game, which is apparently what the game was actually made for, with the campaign only being tacked on right at the end of the development. It also sold quite well, selling over 200,000 copies in its first year globally, which weren't bad numbers for 1997. It didn't reach the same numbers as Bullfrog's other massive releases like Populous and Theme Park. That doesn't make it any lesser of a game. But most importantly, Dungeon Keeper was seen at the time as an amazing swan song for Peter Molyneux, his final game with his studio that he had built from the ground up, turning it into a legendary developer in the eyes of gamers worldwide. And we were all eager to see what he would be doing next, because there is no way that a guy like that would ever crush our hopes and dreams with false promises and bullshit hype in the future.
You know, we wanted to have the trees growing, and we dropped that because it took too much processor power to actually do that, and we'd much rather put that into the hero. So things have gone into Fable and things that have been taken out.
To this day, Dungeon Keeper still stands as a pretty unique game that expertly blends RTS and God Sim elements that is hard to get right, and you can tell they got it right just by how much love this game gets from people who played it back in the day. Look, you don't get projects like Keeper Effects that work this well for a game that's only average. There have been a few spiritual successes, but unfortunately none of them captured the magic of the original for me. Call it nostalgia or rose-tinted goggles, but they're all just missing something. Dungeon Keeper did have an expansion pack with the deeper dungeons adding in a new campaign, but this really is just a map pack that doesn't add anything new gameplay-wise. There is no overworld narration in the campaign either, or any real connection between levels. It's just that the avatar's back and you gotta stop him. These map packs were a pretty common thing in the 90s, but I never really liked these kind of releases. The deeper dungeons is much harder than the original campaign though, throwing you into much more difficult scenarios that feel like they have a very specific solution to. I do think that the main reason people really know about the deeper dungeons though is simply because it comes packaged with the gold version of Dungeon Keeper, which is the version that's sold on GOG and Steam. But unfortunately, even with all the praise and success, Dungeon Keeper's impact on Bullfrog was the beginning of the end. Love him or hate him, but Molyneux was the heart of Bullfrog, and that heart had just been ripped out with no proper replacement. While there was still an insane amount of talented people at Bullfrog, a large chunk of them were deciding to leave on their own accord. Molyneux started Lionhead Studios, and while he wasn't allowed to poach or headhunt employees from Bullfrog as a condition of his departure from EA, it sure as hell didn't stop staff from just quitting their jobs at Bullfrog and just start handing their CVs to Lionhead. It looks like that's exactly what Jonty Barnes and Mark Healy did, among others. They may just sound like random people to you, and I don't blame you if you have no idea who they are or what they have done since. But Jonty Barnes, for example, would later work at Bungie as the executive producer for Halo 3, which at that point was easily the biggest game release that I'd ever seen in my life. He was also the general manager for the first Destiny game. Mark Healy would co-found Media Molecule after his time at Lionhead, which put out Little Big Planet for the PS3, selling millions of copies, which would be impressive. But I'm pretty sure the only reason it reached those numbers is because PS3 had no games.
I don't know why.
Simon and Dean Carter would found their own development studio called Big Blue Box, where they would create the game they both had always wanted to make since they were kids. Big Blue Box became a kind of satellite studio for Lionhead, and that dream game they were working on would eventually become Fable, which all the staff at Lionhead, including Jonty Barnes and Mark Healy, would eventually work on as well. These were a few of the bigger names that left Bullfrog after Dungeon Keeper, but there were more that just left over the years, like Glenn Corpus. The studio really did just start hemorrhaging talent after Dungeon Keeper's release. Bullfrog didn't die straight away though, and hell, they kept making solid games, including a sequel to Dungeon Keeper that really does stand up on its own. But as more people left, EA's grip was tightening more, and it choked the creativity and innovation that once defined Bullfrog before finally turning it into a hollow shell that was assimilated into EA UK. This completed the final merge into the grey, uninspired, all-consuming goo that is EA Games. Even EA's former CEO, John Riccitiello, a man who I have many things to say about, none of them good, admitted that they really fucked up with Bullfrog. Not knowing what they should have done with them, and acting too dictatorial towards them after Molyneux had left. Not know what to do with them. Man, maybe like a Syndicate FPS would have been a good idea? How sick would have that been? Honestly, I can't think of anyone who wouldn't want that. But in the end, Bullfrog died, and Dungeon Keeper really was a passion project that signaled that demise. It was almost too ambitious for itself, its existence seemingly only possible because of its hellish development that needed a blood sacrifice just so we could experience what it was like to be truly evil for once. But what we got for it was a truly unique experience that still holds up today, and it's definitely worth checking out. You can get it pretty cheap on Good Old Games and Steam, and it works fine, even without installing Keeper effects, so you should definitely check it out if you haven't, or even just revisiting it after decades of not playing it just like me. I sunk around 15 hours getting through the campaign and had an absolute blast the whole way through. And that's without doing the bonus levels they didn't even mention, or jumping into the multiplayer, so it's definitely worth the money. Anyway, that's all for this one. Like and subscribe, and take it easy. More audio surf content coming soon.